Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Jessica Seward. I'm the Director of Demand Gen at ThreatConnect. I'm going to take a few minutes to go over some housekeeping items, and then I will introduce the speakers and go over the agenda. So first, I want to let you know that everyone's phone lines are muted to keep background noise to a minimum. So if you do have questions, please ask them by typing them into the chat feature on your webinar console, and then we'll go through them and answer all the questions at the end of the webinar. Second, the webinar is being recorded today, and we will send out the recording as soon as we have it available, probably tomorrow or the next day. So now I will go ahead and introduce today's speakers. First, we'll hear from Julia Fadzieva. Julia is a consultant for the Total Economic Impact practice at Forrester. In this role, she has worked with a number of technology clients to demonstrate and justify the business return on investment and value of technology investments based on the costs, benefits, and risk associated with specific investments. Then we'll hear from Megan Horner. Megan is the Director of Product Marketing at ThreatConnect. She works closely with the product, sales, and marketing teams to ensure an effective go-to-market strategy is in place. She has experience working for vendors of all sizes across numerous cybersecurity disciplines. So now moving on to today's agenda. You can go to the next slide. We're going to be talking about the Total Economic Impact study of the ThreatConnect platform. So this webinar will guide you through the Forrester TEI methodology and how this methodology was used to derive the study results from ThreatConnect customers. It will help you understand the ROI an organization could expect from an investment in the platform. And then we will end with a Q&A today. That's it for me. I'm going to turn it over to Julia for now.
Thanks, Jessica. And it's a pleasure for me to be here and have the opportunity to walk you through the findings of the Total Economic Impact study. At this point, you may be asking yourself, what is a TEI? And so, as we just mentioned a couple times, the TEI is the Total Economic Impact. We built the TEI methodology about 20 years ago when Forrester found that over 90% of IT decision makers in North America saw value in a business case. And so the question became, what is the effective business case study? Early on, the case studies focused specifically on IT costs and IT savings, or the total cost of ownership. And then going one step further, they started to include things like the benefits and the business efficiency, right, and user efficiency as well. And finally, the TEI case study today looks at the ROI, but also takes into the account risk and uncertainty around the investment. We also evaluate long-term outcomes such as scalability and flexibility, and I'll tell you more about those when we get there. But the TEI framework provides a realistic and very conservative technology assessment that you should feel very confident in using. So here within the TEI framework, we'll look specifically at benefits such as improvements to productivity or efficiency, cost avoidance, or incremental revenue, depending on the technology. We also look at the costs, such as the cost of implementation or ongoing support and training that go into the use of the technology. We consider flexibility. Now that you have the technology, what are the long-term paths that are opening to you and what impact they may bring to your business? And as a final step, we look at the risk to account for certain variations in benefits and the cost that different organizations may have. All of these considerations come together when we build the total economic impact analysis. To build the study, we take a multi-step approach. We start with a series of conversations with our ThreatConnect and Forrester experts to lay the foundation for the conversations with the ThreatConnect customers. As the next step, we interviewed 4 ThreatConnect customers to understand what their experience was before and after they made a decision to invest in ThreatConnect. And based on these interviews, we then built a financial model that I will share with you in the course of the next few slides. Before we move into the most exciting things, I need to stop here for a minute for the fine print. So the important things to remember is that this study is commissioned by ThreatConnect, and they provided the name of the organizations for Forrester to interview. But beyond the introduction, ThreatConnect is not involved in the interviewed, and the interviews remain confidential between Forrester and the interviewees. ThreatConnect also reviewed Forrester findings, but Forrester maintains editorial control over the study and its findings. Actually, one last thing I want you to keep in mind is that there is the study should be looked at as the framework, and it should be seen as something that can help you evaluate the outcome of an investment. And Forrester strongly advises that readers use their own estimates within this framework to determine whether it's appropriate for your own organization to invest in ThreatConnect. So let's look at the high-level findings and high-level results of the total economic impact. To summarize it in one statement, Forrester concluded that ThreatConnect provides an intelligence-driven security operations platform that helps integrate disparate security technologies, automate workflows, and establish process consistency, measure the effectiveness of the security programs, and improve organizational security. It all sounds great, but it probably would be interesting for you to know what exactly this means in a quantifiable way. So the first number I want to mention here is a net present value of $2.8 million. The NPV represents the benefits over the costs over the 3-year period. This includes the 10% discount to account for the fact that money is worth more today than it is the next year or the year after. If we forget about the costs of the solution for a minute, we would be looking at the 3.7 million in pure benefits. That's the number on the right. And the NPV of 2.8 million resulted in a 320% return on investment. Oops, sorry about that. For those who are less familiar with the ROI, a negative number here would mean that you've lost money. 0 is a break-even point, and any positive number means that you've made money on the investment. In this case, with the ROI of 320%, you can say that you've received the benefits that are more than 3 times the size of the investment over the course of 3 years. So for this study, Forrester interviewed 4 organizations. All of them were the ThreatConnect platform users. We looked at organizations across a variety of industries, including, as you can see here, a healthcare provider, a defense organization, a financial services provider, and a security infrastructure company. All of them shared their stories and brought in a unique perspective to how ThreatConnect provides value to their respective businesses. Despite the variety of the industries that we talked to, we saw a lot of similarities when it came to concerns and challenges that the customers experienced before they came to ThreatConnect. The security data, it's not going to be a surprise that security data resides in multiple systems today. Prior to ThreatConnect, the organizations had to manage security data from disparate security systems and also different feeds. And so they had no centralized console to get the overall picture. Lack of transparency often resulted in teams duplicating work in different silos and paying license fees for redundant tools, and that was not something that they wanted to continue. Organizations also struggle to keep up with the growing number of alerts that analysts needed to process manually. Even better trained or more experienced security professionals had to spend time on manual instead of proactive work that they could have been doing. Lack of a single monitoring interface for security operations and intelligence was also a concern. Prior to ThreatConnect, companies lacked a single view of all available security data, which resulted in redundant licenses and fees. Security-related communication was previously conducted via email, which was inefficient and took a long time, and also imagine searching for something in an email. Security teams and individuals felt disconnected. They had no visibility into each other's work streams and different priorities. So they could have been, the left hand didn't know what the right was doing at the time. And the volume of threats that faced the organizations was far greater than the current capacity to process them. Then the threat prioritization was also a challenge for Security Operations Center analysts, and as a result, a number of threats could not be addressed in a timely manner. And now what's important is that once the organizations implemented ThreatConnect, they were able to achieve their goals. First of all, the organizations lowered internal barriers to collaboration. A single platform brought security teams closer together and encouraged analysts to spread awareness or share experiences with a broad audience to speed up resolution. Organizations also automated data ingestion, which allowed them to eliminate a significant portion of alerts, IOCs, and vulnerabilities, and even phishing emails. It freed up experienced analysts to do more proactive and specialized work. Cost avoidance and cost reduction were also achieved. Companies reduced the hours and the resources that were dedicated to certain tasks, but they also were able to identify redundant or, in some cases, non-value add intelligence feeds and security tools that could be then retired for additional cost savings. The organizations can now, with ThreatConnect, track not only the type and frequency of the threats that they face, but also the outcomes of their automation efforts. For example, they could see how many times any given automation playbook has been run or how much time the organization has saved by implementing an automated workflow. So all of those were important to track their success on this journey. And at a larger scale, companies achieved improved organizational security. They finally got a chance to investigate threats that they could not address earlier, and also they gave their analysts more time to proactively search for them, which meant for the organizations that they became better protected against vulnerabilities and threats. To give you a sense of what ThreatConnect customers are saying, I want to share the words from the Director of Cybersecurity Analytics Development at one of the interviewed companies. All security teams were collecting, generating, and analyzing intelligence on their own, and some of them had built internal tools to do so. We were looking for a centralized platform that was generally acceptable to everyone within the organization. This is just one, example of what issues they were having, what challenges they were trying to resolve. And then I have another quote here I won't read for the interest of time, but in the study itself, there is a richness of different customer stories and their sentiment about it. This one is just to give you a taste for it. So we looked at the commonalities and the differences between the interviewed organizations and created a composite company that was representative of the stories that we heard. The case study and the rest of the slides will focus on the benefits that are accrued by this composite organization. In this case, it will be a global company with about $5 billion in annual revenue and 20,000 employees. Security analysts in this organization receive on average 5,000 alerts every week, and it takes an analyst about 15 minutes to process an alert. The organization also receives on average 750 phishing emails per week, and about 10 minutes are required to process a phishing email. The company we are talking about here is also geographically distributed and has several security-focused teams. No specific threat intelligence platform or security automation and orchestration solution were deployed prior to ThreatConnect. All good pieces to keep in mind as we speak. So each interviewed organization, well, actually, now that we've set the stage, let's look at the most interesting part here. What benefits did the composite organization see as the result of using ThreatConnect? The two benefits that come together or somewhat are related are the automation-related benefits. The first one comes from the companies being able to triage the massive amounts of alerts that they received, and the second has something to do with the triage of phishing emails that the companies received in large quantities. The third benefit that we will cover is how the organizations use ThreatConnect to eliminate redundant sources of information. And finally, we'll look at how organizations were able to improve their overall security posture with the tools that they got with ThreatConnect. So each company that we spoke to used ThreatConnect to automate workflows and free up limited resources for cases where a deeper investigation was required. Prior to ThreatConnect platform, security teams were overwhelmed by quantities of alerts to process and the number of threat intelligence feeds that they had to check against. One of the senior IT security analysts told us that it was impossible for analysts to check all the alerts that they received without any kind of automation. And we at Forrester have seen this as well before. Our own research shows that manual activities and alert fatigue make the security teams much slower to respond to security events, and that leaves organizations sadly vulnerable. So to reduce the load on its security and IT staff, the interviewed organization used ThreatConnect to introduce workflow automations with Playbooks, and we may hear more about that from Megan. As a result, they automated repeatable analyst actions and saved thousands of hours worth of analyst time. Another significant outcome was that one of the interviewees pointed out to us that now analysts were freed from the tedious work and were actually empowered to make decisions where human intervention was most valuable. Forrester assumed that for the Composite Company, these organizations received 5,000 alerts every week, and the number grows by 2% each year. It takes an analyst an average 15 minutes to review an alert, and based on the interviews, we can say that the automations built with ThreatConnect Playbooks helped the organizations reduce the burden on the analysts by 50% in the first year. And as the organization introduces more and fine-tunes the current workflow automations, the number increases by 10% each year. After 3 years, the Composite organization saw the financial impact of $3 million stemming from the automation only. A very similar story can be told about the impact of triaging phishing emails. One interviewee specifically received several thousand phishing emails notifications every month, and each reported email demanded attention and time from the IT and security teams to determine whether the email was indeed malicious and required further investigations, or it could just be deemed as false positive. The organization used ThreatConnect to automate the initial email diagnostics. The analysts had to only spend time afterwards on the emails that were flagged by ThreatConnect as risky. And when users reported a legitimate email, the automation responded back to them and said, you reported an email that should not be a phishing email, and then auto-deleted it from the system. For the Composite organization, Forrester assumes that users, oh my God, I'm so sorry about this. And we're back. So for the Composite organization, again, we assumed that the company got 750 emails on average per week, and 90% of them are not malicious and should be considered false positive. Before ThreatConnect, it took on average 10 minutes of analyst time to review one reported email. And with the automation that was introduced by ThreatConnect, the company eliminated the need for analysts to look at 60 to 80% of the phishing emails, which saved the company the total of over 250K in productive analyst time over 3 years. And that's not a small thing to get here. Prior to ThreatConnect, all interviewed companies used multiple security tools and intelligence feeds, and that may be very similar to what you're experiencing. They did not really have a single management interface and would integrate all that could integrate all available data security. In some cases, different security teams within the organization could be using the same software and paying the license fee twice without even knowing about it. So ThreatConnect provided that single view of the intelligence that they needed and helped the teams reassess the use and the value of the software and intelligence feeds, saving costs on redundant and low-value products. We heard a lot from the organizations that experienced that. So after evaluating the quality of the data that was received from multiple intelligence feeds, the Composite organization canceled its subscription to one of the resources, saving $50,000 per year, which over the 3-year amounted to nearly $112,000 in savings if you look at the present value. Before ThreatConnect, the enterprise security teams did not have a single pane glass view of the threat intelligence feeds. And that is an uncomfortable feeling if you are on the enterprise security team. They often felt overwhelmed by the disparate security tools and data sources and spent time manually analyzing the incoming alerts. As a result, potentially critical security threats could go uninvestigated and unaddressed longer than they desired. And so that exposed organizations to greater risk. I want to use the words of one interviewee who told Forrester that ThreatConnect provided security teams with a bigger picture view and a better understanding of the threat landscape so that the teams could then better prioritize the actions that they needed to take to defend the enterprise. Based on the industry research, we also know that the average cost of a security breach is about $3.9 million, and it increases by 6.4% each year. With the assistance of ThreatConnect, the organization took measures to integrate disparate security technologies, automate workflows, shorten time to detection, and also to enable analysts to focus on proactive work that included threat hunting. As a result, the organization reduced the risk of a breach by 5%, which over the 3-year period resulted in over $400,000 in costs or costs of avoided a breach. So in addition to all the benefits that the interviewed companies were able to put a specific number to, they also talked about the benefits that they couldn't really quantify. ThreatConnect provided opportunities for collaboration, and that was huge for the companies that we spoke to. Security and threat intelligence communication was previously facilitated via email, which was taking a really long time and wasn't efficient. With ThreatConnect communities, security teams received access to an easy-to-use mechanism for fast information sharing. Communities have been adopted by 100 different folks inside the company, and so it's now an established channel that they use to spread awareness or share experience with a broad audience. These are the words from the Director of Information Sharing and Analysis at the defense company. Dashboards and reports also helped monitor and evaluate security operations and intelligence. Several interviewed companies used ThreatConnect dashboards to see in one place what was happening in their environments in real time, whereas previously if they had to gather the data, they needed to go to multiple sources and it could take days. Senior leadership also took use of the dashboards because they could now assess the big picture of the threats that were faced by the organization, and also they could look at the overall trends in malware. Program managers specifically used the dashboards to identify which automation tools and playbooks were being used and where there were more areas for training and new automations. Also, better visibility into internal security practices led to user education. To give you one example, the organization that used ThreatConnect to manage user-reported phishing emails identified people who frequently submitted phishing emails that were in fact non-malicious, and so the organization used playbooks to automatically reach back out to those users and assign phishing email training to them. As an outcome, in the course of several years, the organization reduced the number of phishing emails reported by users by more than 60%. Just think about that number for a second. And at the same time, users became significantly better and more accurate in identifying and reporting the true phishing attempts. And finally, easy integration with security tools provided a unified view of the security technology stack. Each interviewed company used a variety of security technologies that were provided by different vendors. Before ThreatConnect, the tools did not exchange the data with each other, did not have a shared management interface, and interviewed companies found it easy to onboard new security tools on the ThreatConnect platform to get that single view of the technology. As you can probably imagine, there is a cost that's associated with using the ThreatConnect platform. And for the composite organization and for the majority of the interviewed customers, it would go something like what's shown on this slide here. So the first thing would be the annual fees for the platform, and that is based on the number of users. Then the organization also assigned resources to implement the solution and also to train the team how to use ThreatConnect. And finally, 2 developers and 2 security professionals were assigned part-time to perform the ongoing work in the solution. So Forrester accounted for these costs as we built the financial model. As I mentioned earlier, when we talked about the TEI methodology, we want to make sure that we account for the variability between organizations when we build a TEI case study. The result will certainly vary for each listener and for each reader of the report. Your own organization may be more or less committed to building and using playbooks for saving time and manual labor. You may be able to eliminate more or fewer subscriptions, and the impact of triage could be different for you because of the number of phishing emails or alerts or IOCs that you see as an organization. Implementation costs and durations are also likely to vary somewhat, and you may spend your spend in further automation can also not necessarily be identical to what's shown in the study. So we take these risks into the account, and when we build the financial analysis, we bring the benefits down by 5, 10, or 15%, depending on the level of risk. And we also build the risks into costs because we make them higher to account for that uncertainty. That means that when you see the ROI, it's already been risk adjusted, and you should feel pretty good about the numbers because they are conservative, in fact. And finally, let's discuss some of the new business opportunities that were enabled by the ThreatConnect technology. These are longer term. All interviewees talked about the benefits of automating workflows to identify threats and discuss plans for new playbooks. So looking forward to building more of those automations. One of the areas where they expect to see even more benefits is through the new automations when it comes to incidents response, and they haven't gotten there yet. Also, building a connected security organization is on the radar for the interviewees. Several of them described security teams within the organizations as siloed and following inconsistent processes, duplicating efforts, using redundant tools. So with ThreatConnect, they've started on that journey of consolidating their teams and consolidating the tools that they're using. And this is going to be an ongoing journey moving forward. So now that we've heard the details about the benefits and the costs that come from using ThreatConnect platform, I'd like to look at the financial summary one more time. The light blue columns that you see on this slide represent the benefits, and the gray bars show the costs. The navy line is showing the cumulative net benefits. The total NPV, as we mentioned earlier, reaches $2.8 million in the 3-year period, and the ROI amounts to 320% in those 3 years, which is an excellent, excellent outcome. As I mentioned, this already accounts for the risk, so you should feel good about it. And with this last look at the financial analysis, I want to conclude the brief summary of the TEI study. The full version definitely has more content and more real-life examples of how customers are using that platform. And I strongly encourage you to take a deeper look into the study and make sure that you take advantage of those examples that are presented in it. But this is enough of me talking today, and I apologize for the slides jumping at you. So I want to pass at this point to Megan for a closer look at the customer benefits and the technology behind them.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Julia, for the thorough explanation and review. So as Julia just went over, one of the purposes of the Forrester TEI study was to take a look at the benefits ThreatConnect platform users experienced, and that includes both those quantifiable numbers as well as the non-quantifiable benefits. So what I want to spend a couple minutes doing now is talking about just a handful of some of those statements Forrester heard from the interviewed organizations, and then going one level deeper and explaining at a very high level the ThreatConnect technology that enables those sorts of benefits to be realized. Next slide, Julia, please. So let's start with automation orchestration. To reduce the load on its security and IT staff, a healthcare company used to produce more than 60 workflow automations with Playbooks, which saved them about $1.3 million per year in labor costs. Dollars and time saved through automation was definitely a common theme throughout the interviews, and quite frankly, is really the easiest thing to track when it comes to ROI. This is due to a customizable built-in ROI calculator. It's associated with every single ThreatConnect playbook created, so it's out of the box and very easy to do. But what exactly do I mean when I say playbook? Let's dig a little bit deeper into that on the next slide. So playbooks have become a fairly common term within the threat intel and security operations world. They're used to document a given workflow or process and automate the specific steps of it. What is great about playbooks is that you can combine both human and machine-driven decision-making to support processes that still may require a human to review or provide input. so it can sort of serve as like a checkpoint in a broader process, or you can rely solely on that technology to run a playbook from start to finish to complete any given process. Playbooks within ThreatConnect do give you the ability to continuously apply relevant threat intel to applicable processes to continue to evolve and be more diligent and more accurate. And it's really not just the application of external threat intelligence to your playbook processes that's going to be making you more effective. Hundreds of technology integrations are supported via our ever-growing roster of technology partnerships. Many of these integrations support the sending of security data actually back to ThreatConnect so that it can be used to continuously inform processes like I did just mention. So really, at the end of the day, playbooks are about executing the steps of a process through a predefined criteria. You're in the driver's seat when it comes to being able to control when and how the playbook is executed. Playbooks do allow for processes to be documented and streamlined, with each process being completed at the same time, the same way each time, which greatly decreases that chance of human error. Next slide, please. In order to visualize what I'm talking about, you can see on this slide a screenshot that shows a very simple ThreatConnect playbook that controls the process of deploying indicators first to a firewall block list, and then, if successful, sending those indicators to a SIM, whether it be Splunk or QRadar. The appropriate admins will receive a Slack message notifying them of the success, and the successful path here is shown via the bluish arrows that are on the top. And you can see if the process fails at any point, the firewall admins will receive both an email as well as a message sent to Slack, notifying them nearly instantaneously about the failure, so there can be further investigation as to why the playbook did not run successfully to completion. And that sort of negative path, we'll call it, is shown with the orange arrow path. So this is just one simple example of a process that can be built as a playbook. Some of the more common playbooks we've seen customers using include creating a case in a ticketing system based on specific criteria, or another even more common example is creating a mailbox where employees of a particular organization could send a potential phishing email, and then the security operations or threat intel team can automate the process of determining if those emails are actually malicious or not. The types of potential playbooks really are countless. They include automating tasks within ThreatConnect, as well as, like we were just discussing, connecting via those integrations to other security technologies that are likely already present in your environment in your current stack. Julia, if you could move on, please. So moving on to the next benefit and feature pairing. Several interviewed organizations use ThreatConnect dashboards to see in one single place what was happening in their environment in real time, whereas previously they were gathering that data from multiple sources, and it could take hours, if not days. So senior leadership, we found, was looking at the dashboards to assess the big picture of the threats faced by the organization, the overall trends in malware, which was not surprising to us. And then we also found that program managers were looking more specific So for example, if they were seeing a lower number when it came to the executions of a particular playbook that they were originally expecting to have higher levels of adoption of, they would look at the specific departments to see if there was an opportunity for training, to see if that needed to be relooked at, or if there was a new way to automate something. So what you're seeing through these examples is that with a dynamic and customizable system, you're able to get users with all sorts of priorities and all sorts of responsibilities into that one platform, working off of a customized dashboard that shows them what they know, what they need to know when they need to know it, which is obviously on an individual by individual basis oftentimes. So the next slide will dig a little bit deeper into dashboards. So when it comes down to it, dashboards are most frequently utilized for monitoring and reporting on a specific set of information. The screenshot on the right of the slide here demonstrates some of the capabilities ThreatConnect dashboards can offer to the users. If you're a manager, for example, you're able to track uncompleted and completed user tasks to better assess performance of your team. This same concept does go for individual contributors. As soon as you sign into ThreatConnect, you're seeing your dashboard, and you can easily see what open tasks and new notifications are waiting for you each time you sign into the ThreatConnect platform. If you're a member of the security operations team, maybe you'd like to track the amount of rules deployed to your EDR or firewall technology over a certain amount of time. Or as a director, maybe you're like that healthcare company we mentioned in the playbook section of the presentation, and you're looking for that total financial savings or total ROI since implementing playbooks, which is all gathered from those ROI calculators I touched on briefly. So the possibilities for these dashboard cards does go on and on. Our dashboards are presented to users through a drag and drop interface. It looks just like that screenshot there. So dashboard cards can be moved around and resized based on what makes sense to the users. These dashboards can be private or shared amongst other users at your organization, of course, depending on what's appropriate for you. And you are able to create and save multiple dashboards that supports your changing needs and responsibilities, so you can flip back and forth between each based on the information that you need to know on any given day. So what it comes down to is ThreatConnect Dashboards provide that place that you can go and get your insights and situational awareness, as well as monitor items like incidents, threat intel, threat actors, or other users or other technology. So as we finish up today, I did want to talk about what it's really all about for us, especially, which is getting everyone together in one platform to allow all the users and all the security teams to benefit off of the work each is doing. So we received probably close to 100, if not more, really great quotes and pieces of insight from the organizations that were interviewed for the TEI study. I'd have to say that this quote is up there as one of my favorites. So the security intelligence team lead at a financial services company was the one that told Forrester this during an interview, but they mentioned that ThreatConnect brought everyone together and reminded them about the one team, one fight mentality, where before the team was operating in silos, not because people chose that, but because they didn't have an environment to support that one team, one fight mentality. So for us, this really brings up a notion that may seem simple, but is often forgotten, especially when selecting and deploying automation orchestration technologies, which are definitely up and coming technologies as you look at the types of solutions that are available. So next slide, please, Julia. So going off of that topic, we definitely believe that combining your threat intel with your automation orchestration processes is key. I would think it's safe to assume that most people on this call, and likely in the security industry in general, would nod their heads in agreement at this. It's definitely not groundbreaking, but it's harder than you think for organizations to practically apply this concept to their security program, as we found out as we're helping our customers deploy the technology across their teams. But what's interesting is a lot of the time the trouble doesn't arise with the technology, because of course the tech does make it possible for organizations to realize that feedback loop between threat intel and SecOps. But sometimes the trouble arises with getting all of the required buy-in to support that cyclical relationship. So what I want to do next is to provide a quick resource that can be used at least as a starting point to have these types of conversations. Next slide, please. So this is a lot to take in, but essentially what it's telling you is that intelligence fuels decision-making when it comes to taking action against a threat. So once you make contact with or become aware of an adversary, you have an opportunity to collect information and store it as knowledge of their attack patterns. This can drive your knowledge of the adversary so you can defend better against them in the future. Knowledge of your adversaries allows you to ask better questions and find gaps in your knowledge. This evolution of a piece of information, as you can see on the right, this proves it's live. So taking that piece of information and turning from data, which you see at the very bottom there, to eventually informing an actual decision is a powerful process that requires both context and analytics. So by context and analytics, I mean additional information and knowledge provided by external and internal sources, as well as analytical driven processes to make sense of this mountain of data, information, and knowledge, and turn that into the intelligence that can inform decisions and influence positive change. So essentially what this is saying is you're getting an influx of data, both from internal logs coming from your own security technologies, but you're also managing a lot of, say, threat feeds that are coming from externally. So what ThreatConnect gives you, or in general, supporting this premise, is that you need a system to take all of this data and move it up through the chain so that it becomes information which then can be used to change and make better decisions moving forward. So let's wrap up by covering some of the benefits of threat intel and orchestration. So by using one platform that puts threat intel and orchestration side by side, you create that system of insight, enabling you to alert, block, and quarantine based on relevant threat intel. This isn't just relevant for tasks such as sending indicators of compromise to a firewall to be blocked, like we saw in the previous screenshot, but it's also applicable to processes required for threat hunting or incident response related tasks. Having that multi-source validated threat intel can help ensure that you are alerting, blocking, as well as focusing on the right things. When you automate tasks based on threat intel thresholds, such as likelihood that an indicator is malicious, and you're memorializing all of that information, you can then strategically look at your processes to determine how to improve them and continue to add context and gain insight to speed up decision making, as we saw in that previous graphic. Situational awareness and historical context is key to that decision making. Working directly from threat intel allows you to work quicker and prevent attacks before they happen. The more you can automate up front, the more proactive you can be. So by eliminating those false positives and using validated intel, you are increasing the accuracy of the actions taken. And this accuracy leads to confidence and improved speed and precision, which will likely allow adoption to be increased even more once people are seeing the successes that your team's seeing. So what all of this is saying is that intelligence-driven orchestration is data first, while security orchestration without intel is action first. When your threat intel is stored in a flexible data model that you can alter based on your team's needs, you can set your processes to automatically adjust if the threat landscape should change. And ultimately, adding this additional context is going to create an expansion in insight and speed up decision-making across the board, increasing adoption and allowing you to realize a lot of the same benefits that the organizations interviewed by Forrester for the TEI study were able to realize as well. So that is all I have today for you. Jessica, back to you for any questions that may have come through.
All right, thank you very much, Julia and Megan. Great information. We have had a few questions. A couple people asked about the recording. This is being recorded, and we'll send it out probably tomorrow, if not the next day. We'll get it posted to YouTube and send that out to everyone. Let's see what other questions we have. First one comes from Alex. My company is a different size than the one you discussed. How can I apply these learnings to my company?
All right, so I will take that one.
Okay.
All right, so this is a great question. And what I want to say is that the study is developed in a way that each organization should be able to use it and, use it to evaluate their own potential investment, right? So you need to take the framework that's in the study and look at the financial model that is shown and see how your organization is similar or different, and evaluate what you need to adjust to see the outcome for yourself. So for example, some numbers actually may be easier to scale than others. So you can easily plug in the number of maybe alerts that your analysts receive and how long they spend on average per alert. So that will help you evaluate the magnitude of that benefit, for example, the automation benefit. But it may be a little bit harder, and you need to think a little bit more about adjusting the cost of a data breach that we show in the model and thinking whether this applies to your organization, it would be different. But essentially what I want to say is the model is built to scale. Feel free to get the study and plug in your numbers and see what the outcomes look like.
Okay, great, thank you. Next question. Can you explain again why Forrester makes risk adjustments to benefits?
All right, I guess that will be me again. So I think we may all agree that the risk is really inherent in any technology project, and in an effort to show a reasonable and also, achievable benefit in the ROI totals, Forrester risk-adjusted benefit downward and costs upward. So the risk-adjusted benefits, in this case, in our case, still provide the risk-adjusted ROI of 320%, and that's a very compelling business case that raises confidence in the investment and tells you that it's likely to succeed. The risk-adjusted number essentially should be taken as a realistic expectation for the investment, because all the benefits that we heard from the customers were brought down and the costs were brought up in order to make it to account for the vulnerabilities and the variability in the different types of organization that could be using ThreatConnect.
Okay, great. Thank you, Julia. Next question. Do you have playbook templates that come with the ThreatConnect platform, or are those all built from scratch? And kind of the same thing, what about dashboards? Megan, do you want to take that one?
Yep, I can take that one. So we definitely do have numerous playbook templates available. Of course, you're going to need like authorization things, like for example, if it needs to connect to a SIM or a firewall, EDR, you name it, you're going to need the proper authorizations, so like an API key or something to plug in. And usually those sorts of things are customized anyways, but we do have customer success teams in place, so nobody's left in the dark to figure those things out on their own. And then yes, for sure, dashboards, a handful of dashboards are available out of the box. Again, you're definitely going to want to take a look at your own priorities and things that you want to take a look at, and put those sorts of things in your own dashboard so it is relevant to you. But yeah, we definitely provide templates and help handhold, especially at the beginning.
Okay, great, thanks. Let me see what else we have here. Another question. In addition to ROI, what are some other good ways to convince my leadership team that we need a solution like this?
All right, so I'll take that one. That's Julia. So honestly, looking at the ROI of 320%, I think it should sell itself to your leadership, but if you need a deeper, dive into the analysis, there are lots of neat details in the full TEI study that could help you seek that leadership's approval. If you are looking, I would suggest to specifically find the examples in the study that are relevant for your organization and that could prove the value for yourself. So for example, if you're looking to consolidate those security data sources, you can use the study to show how ThreatConnect helps with creating that single view. Or if the automation and cost savings are a bigger priority for your company, you should look at those examples and share how those organizations that we've interviewed have been able to achieve that. It's basically up to you, but definitely I would encourage you to look at the customer stories in the study and the real life examples that they've provided on how they've achieved those goals.
Okay, thank you. Another question here. Would you say that an organization would benefit more from the platform if they were more matured in their security processes compared to a company that may not be as mature in their security posture and processes?
I can take that one, Julia. What I would say is it's definitely not exclusively beneficial to companies that are more mature in their security posture and processes. What I would say, especially when looking at automation orchestration, we would definitely want to advise you on having some sort of processes in place, because this tool, of course, this platform is not meant to create processes for you. It's meant to take processes that are already in place and automate them to make them more efficient, and have you be more successful as a security team. With that being said, there's definitely use cases benefits of the platform when it comes to like threat intel investigation and incident response type investigation and finding intelligence that is related to active cases. Those use cases out of the box for sure are beneficial to everybody, no matter the size of the organization or the maturity of a team.
Makes sense. Thanks, Megan. Another question, I think maybe for Julia. How long did this whole exercise last, the TEI study?
I'm not exactly sure what the question entails. The customer interviews that we do, each customer interviews about an hour long, and we, in some cases, have follow-up conversations with the customers after we've completed the interviews with them. But if the question was about the length of the project or the TEI study itself, it takes about 12 weeks in the ideal situation, if that is the question. Megan, do you have anything to add? I'm not sure I answered.
Yeah, I think it took about four months, I would say, long enough for Julia and I to become very familiar with each other.
Yes, for sure.
Start to finish, I would probably say 4 or 5 months.
Great. Thank you both. It looks like that's all the questions we have. Thanks everyone for joining us today, and thank you so much, Megan and Julia. Great information. Thanks everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.